Welcome to Charlie's virtual snorkel tour. So I'm really excited about this. Honestly, one of the reasons I bought my GoPro was to do this exact thing, to just jump over the side right by my boat and snorkel around and show you guys the awesome life that lives down here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So first things first is I dinghied right over to the rock pile, kind of right by the edge of, this is Christmas Cove, right near Epstein's Island. Anchored my dinghy or tied my dinghy off to a mooring and jumped over the side. And the first cool fishy we find right as we jump over the side is a pufferfish. So this surprise looking character is actually called I think it's called a porcupine fish. But this is a regular size one. They usually are about 1.5 feet to 2 feet long. And they have just the cutest big old eyes. They usually hide under rocks like that. And they're not really very uncommon to see. You usually see probably one or maybe two on a 15, 20 minute snorkel. But yeah, they're always fun. One of the things I think is so cool about the coral reefs are their vertical kind of growth, right? So this is probably 20, 25 feet of water. And you can see that it's really kind of filled with chasms and little canyons that you can swim through. And all across the surface, there are corals. Certain corals like to live in different places. Down in the bottom where there's a lot of flow, you see these soft wavy corals. Up towards the top where the water's a little bit warmer and there's a little bit more direct sunlight, you get these often yellowish, kind of crusty growing corals. Some of them are fire corals, so you got to be careful. You definitely never want to touch the reef when you're snorkeling, really at any time. You'll both kill it, but many of the corals are relatives to jellyfish, and they can have stingers. And there's a well-known one called fire coral that is that yellow, crusty-looking one with the white tips, and it can leave a pretty nasty sting if you actually brush into it. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about coral, but also notice the pillar corals. So they're the soft, tall ones that look like big fingers sticking up that are another kind of really cool, noticeable coral type. I think this is a super cool rock to illustrate the beauty of the corals. So you've got sea fans, which are those big, flowing, fan-like corals, and then gorgonians, which are the finger-like ones that flow with the water. And meanwhile, amongst them swim some of the just crazy varieties of the reef. So it's a little bit daunting to even begin explaining the species of fish, and it's maybe easier to break them down into categories. I'll point out some of the more common ones to name them, and obviously any of the really cool ones I'll explain or name them as well. Under this rock, the yellow one with longitudinal stripes, with horizontal stripes, is called a French grunt. The pink reddish one with the big eyes is called a squirrelfish. You find them under most rocks. And then the yellow and black striped one is maybe our most common fish in the Virgin Islands. It's called a sergeant major, and you find them almost everywhere. If you go on a snorkel tour, oftentimes the boats will throw out rice or bread or something, and the sergeant majors will just go everywhere. There were also a few damselfish. So sergeant majors are a species of damselfish, that same shape. It looks almost like a sunfish from the lakes, but it's a really common herbivorous fish with a really cool habit. First off, the adults are brown and not very interesting. The babies are really, really pretty. We passed one earlier with the blue stars all over it, and we just passed two there that were one was black with a white tail, another was blue and yellow. And damselfish have this really, really cool habit of growing algae patches. So they're actually quite aggressive, and if you move your hand towards them, oftentimes they'll nip at your hand or chase your hand away because they're possessive of their algae patches. And they maintain them and monitor them and chase other fish away from a small patch of algae that they claim is their own. A big rule of thumb if you go snorkeling is always dive and see what's underneath things, because that's where a lot of the cool stuff hides. So here I dove down and lo and behold, lobster. So it was a whole cluster of lobster underneath this rock. I come back down a second time to look at them again. I think there were 5 or 6 of them just hanging out underneath that rock. Little Caribbean spiny lobster. People eat them. They're maybe not as tasty as Maine lobster, but they've got good meat. Some people like them better. They're really spiny, so they've got these. They're called Caribbean spiny lobster, obviously, they've got these really sharp spines all over them. You use a snare to hook them, to capture them and pull them out. Also under this rock is the spiny sea urchin, a really common herbivorous invertebrate that actually does a really good job cleaning algae off the rocks. The reason I say good job is coral needs bare rock in order to start growing. And obviously, as the backbone of the coral reef, we're really concerned about the growth and the life of the coral. There's several different species that clean algae and bite algae off the rock to give coral a chance or a place to grow. And sea urchins are one of them. So even though they're kind of unfriendly characters, if you kick or step, I kicked one badly while surfing last winter, they're still a really important species for keeping the reef healthy. I moved up into the shallower water here just to show you how the reef changes just by depth. So you notice the kind of swaying soft corals have disappeared. This is mostly encrusting corals and a beautiful queen angelfish. Normally these hang out a little bit deeper, but you can see the blue and yellow, pretty large fish is called a queen angelfish. There's several other angelfish that have a similar shape but different coloration, and it's always kind of fun to see these guys. About to swim by my face is what's called a barjack. So barjacks are really common carnivorous fish. Often they live under my boat, and they're one of those ones where if you toss a rod over the side or a line over the side during the day, a lot of times what's going to take your bait is one of these little jacks. Not safe to eat, not dangerous to people. Under this next ledge is a bunch of cool guys. So right off the bat, a blue and yellow fish you'll see is called a Spanish hogfish. Then you get to see a pretty good close-up of the scrawled trunkfish. So relative to the cowfish, they're really quite square with that funny little tail. Quite pretty and quite unafraid of people. And then it ends up with a queen angelfish and then a damselfish, an adult damselfish that we talked about earlier. And then as I was snorkeling, I came across this fun little swim through. It's only about 6 feet deep and maybe 6 feet long. But it's always fun to kind of swim through it and see what's down there. And I tried to show you a little bit the variety of encrusting corals. When they say encrusting corals, they're usually hard corals that just kind of grow horizontal across the rock face. They don't grow up and make these cool structures. They just kind of grow flat across it. And then oftentimes interspersed in there are different species of algae or sponges. In addition to swimming and checking underneath things, it's always important to kind of slow down and look closely at some stuff. So here I found some really cool red and white soldier crabs hanging out with a sea urchin. And then this very colorful, I think it's probably a sponge, but I'm not sure what this is growing across the rock. As I swim back to the surface, you can note the damsels that are hanging out across the top of the rock, guarding their algae patches, black with white tails or black with yellow tails. And then to a really kind of famous and cool type of coral. So this is, I believe, elkhorn coral. Staghorn is quite similar, but elkhorn grows a little bit branchier. Really fragile and kind of destroyed often by the hurricane waves, but a really gorgeous rock that builds the coral and grows it up into kind of three-dimensional shape. And alas, my introductory snorkel tour has come to an end. Back to the dinghy. Quick shameless pitch, feel free to subscribe to watch part 2.